Have you ever longed to become someone who feels completely unshakable? A person who no longer gets disturbed by criticism, rejection, loss, or even betrayal? Have you ever imagined a moment when that quiet, emotional pain finally stops? That inner heaviness that lingers even when you try to act fine on the surface? Maybe you are exhausted from constantly trying to satisfy everyone, from maintaining an image that demands you stay strong all the time. In truth, all you ever wanted was a brief pause from the pressure of appearing untouchable. Yet there is something important that most people never hear directly. As long as you keep running away from pain, it will keep influencing your life. As long as you try to numb it, suppress it, or avoid it, you remain controlled by it. You become a prisoner of what happens around you, of the words that cut deep, of the actions that disappoint you, and of the silences that feel unbearable. This is not a sign of weakness. It is simply the condition of most human beings. The only difference is that some people hide it better than others. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in analytical psychology, once suggested that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by what we choose to become through it. And this is where the real insight begins. The goal is not to shut yourself off from the world. It is not about becoming cold, detached, or emotionally unreachable. It is about integration. It is about bringing into awareness everything that currently lives in your shadow and affects you without your realization. True strength is not found in the absence of pain, but in the deep awareness of yourself, even while you are hurting. If you are still listening, it is not accidental. This message is directed toward those who are tired of being hurt by everything and everyone. It is for those who feel emotionally exposed, as if others hold some invisible power over them that they cannot understand. There is a deeper truth here, but it requires facing ideas that may initially feel uncomfortable. And perhaps that discomfort is exactly what begins to free you. The journey starts now. You may believe that what hurts you comes from outside, from people's actions, careless words, unexpected endings, or betrayals you never saw coming. But the uncomfortable truth is far more direct. None of these external events can truly harm you unless something inside you is already sensitive, unhealed, or open. What wounds you is not the event itself, but what it awakens within you. It is the meaning you attach to it, the inner story that forms instantly, the unresolved emotional memories that get activated without warning. Carl Jung's perspective suggests that the emotional pain triggered by the outer world is often a reflection of an unprocessed inner world. This is why two people can experience the same situation, yet react in completely different ways. One remains composed, while the other feels completely overwhelmed. The difference is not the event itself, but the inner landscape it touches. Here lies another uncomfortable realization. Much of your suffering continues because, deep down, there is still a belief that you can control how life and people should behave toward you. You try to become better, more careful, more responsible, more understanding, as if perfection could shield you from pain. But control is only an illusion dressed as safety. The more you cling to it, the more tension you create within yourself. You begin to anticipate everything, overthink everything, and resist everything that feels uncertain. If you truly want relief, it is not control that you need, it is awareness. As long as you believe that others must change in order for you to feel okay, you will remain emotionally dependent on the world outside you. Freedom begins when you recognize that external events only affect you through the internal meaning you assign to them. This is where the real struggle exists, not in the outside world, but in the unconscious mind. What remains unseen, unexamined, and unintegrated ends up controlling your reactions. And this is the level we now move into. One of the greatest illusions you may hold is the idea that you are fully in control of your life. The truth is more complex, especially when you are living on autopilot, reacting without awareness, feeling without understanding the origin, and repeating patterns that later lead to self-sabotage. Carl Jung expressed this idea clearly when he said that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will perceive it as fate. This is not abstract philosophy. It reflects everyday human behavior. The anger that suddenly erupts, the sadness that arrives without warning, the anxiety that appears without explanation, none of these are random. They are signals from within, messages from parts of you that have been ignored for too long. The unconscious is not empty space. It is a living psychological system made of memories, fears, desires, and unresolved emotional experiences. These hidden parts continue to influence your decisions and emotional reactions, even when you are unaware of them. You may wonder why certain comments affect you so deeply, while others seem harmless. The reason is simple. Those words are touching emotional wounds that already exist within you. If they hurt, it is because they are already connected to something unhealed. When these parts are repeatedly ignored, they do not disappear. Instead, they express themselves in distorted ways, through recurring toxic relationships, repeated mistakes, or self-destructive habits. This is not coincidence or bad fortune. It is the unconscious attempting to bring attention to what has been suppressed. The more you avoid it, the more it influences you indirectly. The solution is not avoidance, but understanding. Carl Jung emphasized that we cannot change anything until we accept it. Judgment and repression do not free you, they only deepen internal conflict. If you keep pushing away your emotions, they do not vanish. Instead, they grow stronger beneath the surface and eventually surface in ways you cannot control. Real change begins when you stop resisting your inner world and start observing it honestly. When you stop treating your emotions as enemies and start recognizing them as signals, transformation becomes possible. Without this awareness, you remain unconsciously driven. With it, you begin to regain clarity and choice. This is the threshold between being controlled by your inner world and learning to understand it. Many people believe emotional strength comes from shutting down feelings, building walls, and acting unaffected. They adopt a mask of indifference, saying things like, "Nothing bothers them anymore." Yet internally, the emotional pressure remains. Suppressed feelings do not disappear, they accumulate. True emotional strength is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about understanding what you feel and why you feel it. Carl Jung once suggested that you can study every theory and master every concept. But when you encounter a human soul, you must remain human yourself. This highlights the importance of authenticity over defense. The part of you that hides behind emotional armor is not truly protected. It is isolated. And isolation often intensifies internal suffering. Real strength comes from integration. It comes from acknowledging the parts of yourself that you have rejected or ignored. When you integrate your fears, insecurities, and vulnerabilities, they lose their power over you. You stop reacting blindly to external triggers because nothing inside you is being denied anymore. This process is what Jung referred to as individuation, the journey of becoming your complete self rather than a fragmented identity shaped by external expectations. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. The more you avoid your inner pain, the more control it gains over you. But when you face it directly, something changes. You become less reactive, more grounded, and less easily disturbed. At that point, external situations no longer define your emotional state. You begin to observe rather than absorb. But this path is not easy. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to face what has long been avoided. Pain is not the enemy in this process, it is the doorway. From an early age, you may have been taught to avoid suffering, to see it as weakness, and to suppress anything that feels too heavy. Over time, this creates a habit of emotional avoidance. Yet the more you escape pain, the more it follows you in different forms. It transforms into anxiety, irritability, numbness, or unexplained emotional fatigue. Ignored emotional pain never disappears. It only changes shape until it demands attention in more intense ways. Carl Jung viewed suffering differently. He believed it carried meaning, that it often acted as a message from the deeper self, trying to reach awareness. He even described depression metaphorically as something that should not be rejected immediately, but listened to, as if it carries information worth understanding. However, most people choose distraction instead. They stay busy, avoid silence, and suppress reflection, hoping discomfort will fade on its own. Yet the question remains, what is this suffering trying to communicate? Often, internal pain exists because different parts of the psyche are in conflict. One part seeks growth and change, while another clings to safety and familiarity. This inner conflict creates emotional tension that eventually surfaces as suffering. And until it is acknowledged, it continues to repeat in different forms. The turning point begins when you stop fighting your inner experience and start understanding it. And it is within this inner friction that suffering is born. Because transformation is painful, growth is painful. Releasing old beliefs, cutting off toxic bonds, letting what no longer aligns with you slowly die away. This is a form of mourning, an internal cycle of endings and rebirths. Yet, it is exactly inside this space of collapse that something entirely new begins to emerge. When everything inside you is broken down, when your certainties fall apart, when pain exposes your raw vulnerability, you finally begin to perceive who you truly are beneath all the layers of protection, beneath the performance, beneath the mask. And in that precise moment, suffering takes on a different meaning. It becomes almost sacred, because it brings you face to face with the only thing that can genuinely free you, yourself. Jung understood this deeply. He realized that suffering is not a malfunction in life's design, it is part of the design itself. Pain is not the conclusion of the path, it is the beginning of the journey toward individuation. The difficulty is that most people abandon the path before reaching that dark passage. They escape. They distract themselves. They retreat back into comfort and surface-level living. But not everyone does. If you have reached this point, it suggests you are willing to go through. And what comes next is the understanding of how this passage unfolds, how the process of individuation, however isolating and intense it may appear, ultimately becomes the gateway to freedom. This is where things deepen further. Very few people have the courage to begin the journey of individuation, and even fewer continue it to completion. Because this path does not promise ease, nor does it offer certainty, nor does it protect the ego. Instead, it dismantles it. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are. But this also means, above all, unlearning everything you assumed you were, and that realization often hurts more than external rejection, because you begin to see that much of what once defined you was constructed. You are not your accomplishments. You are not your wounds. You are not the identity you built in order to be accepted, respected, or loved. That identity was a survival structure. It helped you navigate the world. But survival is not the same as living. Individuation is the movement beyond mere survival. It is life calling you into something deeper. It is when the unconscious begins pushing everything hidden, suppressed, and distorted up to the surface. Individuation demands the dissolution of the persona, Jung wrote, for it is only a mask created for collective adaptation. In simpler terms, the mask you wear must eventually be shed to reveal what exists beneath it. It is through this stripping away that you begin to become unshakable, not because nothing affects you anymore, but because you have already endured the fire. You have confronted your inner shadows. You have looked directly at your fear, your anger, your shame, your dependence, and acknowledged them fully, saying, "I see you, and you no longer govern me." This clarity, this conscious awareness of your inner darkness, is what creates a strength that does not depend on validation, approval, or control. You no longer need universal acceptance. You no longer need constant agreement. You no longer need to appear invulnerable because you know your own inner ground, and nothing external can take that away. Real emotional strength is not a shell, it is a center. It is the integration of all fragmented parts into a unified awareness that remains steady through emotional storms. You may still feel pain, but it no longer shatters you. You may still experience hurt, but you do not lose your sense of self because reactivity has diminished and wholeness has begun to take its place. You are no longer living on the surface of yourself. You are living from a deeper internal foundation. However, this depth comes with a cost: solitude. Not because you will be physically alone, but because very few people choose or are able to walk this path alongside you. Most remain caught in surface identities, in emotional avoidance, in fear of inner confrontation. And as you begin to free yourself from these patterns, a natural distance forms. But this distance is not rejection. It is transformation. You do not separate yourself out of superiority. You separate because you no longer fit into the spaces where you once hid. And this leads to the final realization of this journey: awareness as protection. Because it is not emotional hardness that protects you, it is consciousness. This is what must be understood now. True protection is not resistance but clarity. At this stage, one truth must be understood with complete honesty. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will protect you from external pain if you remain unaware of your inner world. Words will still sting. Rejections will still hurt. Losses will still shake you until awareness enters the picture. And awareness is not a sudden miracle. It is a continuous decision. It is choosing to look inward even when it feels uncomfortable. It is taking full responsibility for your emotional experience without constantly projecting blame onto others, circumstances, or fate. Carl Jung expressed it simply: what you resist continues, and what you accept transforms. Much of your life has likely been spent resisting feelings of inadequacy, resisting emotional emptiness, resisting rejection, resisting loneliness, resisting not being seen or understood. And in response, you hid parts of yourself. You suppressed emotions. You tried to control outcomes. You tried to appear flawless. You tried to become invulnerable. And all of that effort has brought you here. Tired, emotionally drained, and exhausted from the constant internal and external struggle. Yet now something has shifted in understanding. Real emotional strength is not rigidity. It is clarity. It is not about building defenses. It is about expanding perception. Because when you truly understand your emotional triggers, your internal patterns, and your unresolved wounds, the behavior of others loses its power to destabilize you. You still feel emotions, but they no longer overwhelm you. You still experience pain, but you no longer disappear within it. And that difference changes everything. What protects you is not avoidance of life, it is full engagement with it. Those who remain on the surface are easily disturbed by every wave. But those who go deeper discover stability, silence, and strength beneath the surface turbulence. And that is the direction you are moving toward. When you begin to live from this integrated state of awareness, presence, and acceptance, life may still bring challenges, but it no longer finds blind spots to exploit. If this message has resonated in any way, if something within has shifted or stirred, you can mark it with a simple intention. I choose awareness. It becomes a reminder that survival through pretense is no longer the goal. living with truth is. And what follows is not an ending, but a continuation. Because real transformation does not begin unless you keep walking beyond the first realization.